Good evening. Let's see. Put this over here. I did. I'm kind of wondering if wait, this might be too loud. I'm kind of wondering if like the fact that everyone goes for comms list first means that we should change it to comms list with an S. Because that's also my first reaction. But I'm pretty sure that if we do that, then I'm going to start writing comm list, the correct version currently. But I don't know. A lot of people write that the first time, and I'm like, maybe we should go for it. I don't know. Hey, Brown Rice Ball. Hey, Sunburns. Let's just jump into doing commissions. I want to see if I can get more done today, which is what I always say every time, but we're gonna try. Stuff around. Okay. What brush should I pick? What brush should today be? You know, I always forget it's Friday too, and then I suddenly remember like the morning of. I'm like, oh, it's the end of the week. It's Friday. It's Dream Day. Breno, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub. I am pretty good. I was feeling kind of dizzy earlier today, but I took a nap, and I'm feeling way better. so glad that like cleared up before I had to stream. I think in terms of like stress and stuff, work has actually been okay. But I'm in the process of trying to find a new place to live because I'm not going to continue my lease where I currently live, and shopping for a new place is so stressful because not only is it like, oh, can I afford this, it's also like I need to like apply and hope to God that like applying to these places that not all of them reject me, you know? Because, like, in terms of qualifying, I feel like I am relatively, and I'm gonna be living with Gary, so it's like, we're both, our incomes together, both of our, like, scores and whatnot, like, financially, I think we're pretty, like, good-looking candidates, on that kind of, like, technicality side, but it's like, so many people are in the market, places disappear so fast, and it's kind of like, it's a bit stressful because we're like, I don't know if we can actually go and see all these places, you know, verify that we like the place and the area and whatnot. So that's been the most recent stressor of my life. And you know, it's an aspect of adulting that I haven't yet had to do, which is like find my own place. Because with school and stuff, I was able to find a place kind of partially through the school, mainly just like a database that they keep of nearby areas that you can live. Because LCAD didn't have like a dorm really, outside of like when you were freshmen. But I was able to live in the same place that I've lived for LCAD afterwards since I left. But stuff's changing, so I'm hoping that I will find a place in time. It'll work out. Like, I guess I'm not in a state of, like, I'm not in a doomer state, you know? I'm not like, we are dire straits, but we're getting close to dire straits in terms of timing. It was functionally impossible to look for a place, like, seriously, before this month. And I need to be able to move in before the end of this month. So yeah, so we're gonna see how that goes. Wish me luck. Yeah, it's like it's the case of like, if you were looking even a month ahead of, or like 2 months ahead, or the previous month before you were meant to end your lease, you're looking at places whose leases are not up, or will be up way before you plan on moving out, so you'd be paying double rent, or they will definitely be gone like afterwards. So it's a little bit, it's a little bit of a kerfuffle, but we'll be fine. I personally have backup plans because Gary and I are not leaving our places at the same time. So I'm leaving first, which means I need to have a backup plan. And like I'm again, like, I think we'll be fine. But it's all about just like not stressing out so much that we start making like rash decisions. I'm trying to stay like zen about it so that I'm not like, you know, oh, it's like, it's too soon, it's like everything's bad, just like go for it, just go for like the one, because we can't bargain. It's like, I would like to make this decision somewhat carefully, and I'm fine like with taking extra measures to make sure that, you know, what place we end up is not something totally out of our comfort zone in terms of like what we need, because like I can work from home, Gary has to drive to work, so it's kind of like trying to figure out a good location and all that kind of stuff. Also making sure that it's like a decent quiet neighborhood. I'm not trying to live in the city. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I appreciate it. I don't know, we're still not totally sold on like locations, so we're looking at a bunch of different places. So we will see how that goes. Again, I don't know, it's kind of like that weird thing where it's like, I guess I'm not worried about it, because in a way it's kind of like, this has to happen regardless of whether or not my like first like everything goes well plan happens or not. Like, if it doesn't happen, I have to come up with a solution. So it's like, in a way, I almost am not as stressed as I think I would have been. Because I'm like, regardless of how I feel about it, like, it's gonna have to happen one way or another. So I'll figure it out if it doesn't go the way I planned it. And I will go from there. Hey, Gabby. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, I think, like, again, with, like, kind of the situation that me and Gary are in, I don't really think we'll, have, like, the worst time finding a place. And I feel very fortunate about that. Like, financially, I think we can both afford a lot of the places we're looking at, which is a lot. That's a pretty big comfort because, like, both of us are working, so we can actually look at places closer to where he works because he works more north. And that's a big weight off of our shoulders, I think. But it's mainly just like competing with other people who are also looking for places because housing is a big crisis right now for people. So, you know, it's like there's the nature of trying to find a place right now, but then it's also just kind of like, hey, this is where I'm going to be spending the next at least year of my life. And that could be like a totally new city. And, you know, a totally new vibe to the life that I'm leading right now. So, lots of important things to consider with this. Any new obsessions or funny incidents? I've been playing a lot of Monster Hunter Rise recently. That's been very interesting because Monster Hunter games are usually not my jam, playstyle wise. But Monster Hunter Rise is actually really fun. I like my first Monster Hunter game technically that I played was World, and then I played a little bit of like Stories, the first one. But I never like got into it. But Gary and Kino, who you might remember from past streams, we've all been playing Rise, and it's pretty cool. I'm not good at the game, but I am actually interested in like learning how to play it, so that's a good first step. But yeah, we'll see. That has been the new game in my life right now. World is hard, and honestly, not. I mean, and Gary's like a huge Monster Hunter fan, so I kind of trust his opinion on this kind of stuff. But it's not like it's what a lot of people consider sort of the most popular, like kind of and most like publicly well received, I guess, like mainstream Monster Hunter game. But it really wasn't a game that I enjoyed playing. It I don't know, I just couldn't get into it. And I honestly think Rise is a much better iteration of what is essentially a very similar like core point of the game, being like, you know, because there's some Monster Hunter games where you can like ride, or where you're more focused on like the riders and not the hunters of like the Monster Hunter universe. But you know, for World and Rise both being about the hunters, it's like I think Rise is actually a lot more fun to play. It's a lot less like stressful, in my eyes. So I enjoyed it. I am like a dual blade main, because one of the biggest reasons that I disliked playing World was how slow it felt. And I think dual blade is just like, oh, you know, it's the perfect storm for me, I think, mechanically. I also really want to learn the light bow gun and the horn. What is called? I forget what it's called. The support one. I think those would be fun to learn. A more ranged weapon. But I am a sucker for damage, so I keep picking up and practicing with using dual blade. Hunting horn, yeah. Burn Rice Ball, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub for 11 months, almost a year. Yeah, I'm excited to get further in the game. I am not sure how I'm gonna do once the damage, like the kind of what is it? The difficulty starts to pick up, because I've been coasting real pretty. I've been coasting real pretty on kind of like the fact that I have like way better gear than people who played Rise originally, since I have like the Sunbreak kind of DLC stuff. But playing through the original game, so you know, all my stats are like ridiculous for my level, but it's getting to the point where I'm like, uh-oh. You mean now I need to get good at this game? Uh-oh. But hopefully I'll stick with it. Slippery. Tiffany, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub. Yeah, I think I'm really struggling to like just draw faces that are attractive, I guess. I don't know. I feel like there's always like that one face where you're like, if I draw this, they are, you know, an attractive character. This is appealing, you know, aesthetic or whatever. I feel like I've always struggled to get a face that I'm like, yeah, that is appealing. I don't know. It's so hard to draw like good-looking people. It's very easy to draw average or like, I don't know, just any like people that are, or even just humanoids that are like ugly or grotesque or like just average, way easier than drawing someone who's just like even partially attractive. Hey, Vacato. Can I draw horror? If I am asked to. I don't think I would draw it like, well, no, I'm not really someone who draws horror myself frequently, because it's not like my favorite genre by any means. But I have been asked to do it, and I'll be honest, it's quite fun actually to get somewhere more creepy or more like kind of grotesque. It's fun coming up with ideas that are meant to be like evoke like a reaction that isn't just like, oh, that's nice, you know. I think it's always fun when you get to step out of your comfort zone and say like, yeah, this one is actually just meant to be gross or meant to be, you know, terrifying, or it makes you sad and kind of grossed out at the same time. It's always fun to get assignments like that. Oh, no. Yeah, I'm fine with anything. Yes, I am, for the most part, cisgender. So, she, they, all fine. I don't really mind when people call me they, them. I use it whenever I don't know what the people's pronouns are. So, if you don't know mine, that's not a big problem. I don't think talking about pronouns is a bad thing. Just so happens that I'm not someone that really minds which one that people use. Hey, Anna. Language is fluid. It always has been. So I don't think it's necessarily surprising that words and definitions change as people change. Given new meanings or completely different meanings, that's just kind of how language evolves. Regardless of whether or not it's specifically about, you know, pronouns or whatnot, or even just random English words or words in any language, they change. If by society you mean just humans in general, Yes, we've always been this way. I think it's much more strange to think that these haven't been aspects or attributes of human and social interactions for as long as humans have been humans. Yes, always feel free to correct me if I get your pronouns wrong. I generally default to they, them, but you're also free to tell me if that's not your preference. Y'all, I hate drawing roses. I hate drawing roses so much. It's my least favorite thing. It's so... They make me so mad. Let's see. I mean, there are quite a few. I feel like most of the artists that I like, yeah, like all of those people generally, like, have always been pretty good at drawing this, like, even their most basic faces are generally very attractive or appealing to look at, regardless of whether or not they're, like, conventionally attractive, which is something, again, that I struggle with, so I think all of those artists have, well, something that they can hit, like, every time they need to draw a face, and every time I draw a face, I'm like, we're in the Wild West. This is absolutely, this is absolutely a war. This is a war of attrition. I'm fighting for my life out here, trying to draw a good face that I like. It's a tall order to ask. I think, honestly, like, every time I draw, anytime anyone draws, for the most part, there's usually some element of a Hail Mary, like, you're out in the Wild West. It's just that with experience, the decisions you make aren't nearly as risky. Like, I know what it's gonna look like if I draw this way, or make this line, or put this down. And I have base understanding and confidence that, like, if at least I know it won't, like, go totally off the rails. But once you get to a certain point of, like, you've been drawing for a while, you kind of understand all these things, all these attributes of art. The question isn't really about, can I draw this anymore? It's about, how well can I do it? Does this does this feel like I'm advancing my you know, like, quality of work, or does it feel like I'm getting too in my head about stuff? So it's like, no, absolutely. Every time I draw is a literal Hail Mary. But there are times where I'm like, I know how this is gonna go. I got an idea for where the road is. Like, we're not gonna do too bad. Sometimes I'm like, I have absolutely no idea what's going on. And I'm just like, I gotta use all my tools that are not fit for the job to try and hope that I can maneuver my way to some kind of amicable, acceptable solution. And sometimes it's like you gotta pull all the stops out, you gotta like pull out all the reference, you gotta like map it out in 3D space. Like, I don't even understand how this object works. How am I supposed to draw it? You like, sometimes you go as far as even just like getting a real version of it and turning it in 3D space. Like, that's pulling out all of the stops to like figure it out fully. You do that for stuff that you don't really understand, and it'd be a real struggle to do that on your own. But then there's stuff like, for me, drawing characters is very much I have specialized tools to make this thing happen, so it's not as much of a crazy situation to draw characters. But I'd be lying if every time I start drawing I'm not like, this one might be the last one. This one might be it, guys. But even when I feel that way, I think with experience comes the soft confidence of like, regardless of where it goes, I can always turn it around. Yes, I apologize that I am a very, very basic American and can only really understand English. Otherwise, I would love if people were able to speak in their home languages, but truthfully, I don't really mind when people speak their own language in chat, but it's more so that sometimes it can get out of hand when a lot of people are speaking in a bunch of different languages to each other, and it can get out of hand, but generally, I apologize that I am not much more than an English speaker. That is true, yeah, we have to keep the chat a good space for everyone. I don't know exactly when. I think it just started becoming less and less important during when drawing certain things, right? Like, I would start drawing the face. I'm like, oh, well, I know where, like, the neck goes, and I know where the shoulders are gonna go, and, like, if it's a very basic pose, one that I can kind of figure out and pose in my head, like, that kind of stuff means that, if I'm gonna start drawing, I don't necessarily need to go through the whole couple steps of drawing in an underlying quick sketch and then doing all that kind of stuff. I'll still do it nowadays for more complicated things, especially compositions with perspective and whatnot, but or if there's like multiple things to figure out in like a composition or a piece, but like I think it just kind of became, I kind of started to feel like drawing the sketch was something I was doing because I was always taught to do a sketch first, right? It's like when you are doing something because you know you or you think you should do it versus when you're doing it because it's actually helping you, right? I think you really feel the difference, or you'll start to feel the difference when you're doing something out of habit, and realizing that certain sketches, certain things that I was sketching felt more out of habit than it was like I'm actually using the sketch for something, and it just ended up taking more time. I found that my drawings were a lot less interesting or even just less fun to draw when I was using a sketch. Like, those things kind of clued me into the idea that maybe I can stop using sketches for certain things, like drawing characters in specific poses that I felt confident in doing, and then it kind of evolved from there. So there wasn't a point where I decided, like, I want to draw without sketches. It just ended up being that it became an extra step I felt kind of stifled by, that I felt like I didn't need, and I don't think it's really any more complicated than that, because ultimately it's just, what's the point of using a guide when you know it so well? I describe drawing from imagination, not using a sketch, like all that kind of stuff. Similarly to how people learn to write. If you've been around, you've heard me say this many times, but when you're first starting to learn to write when you're a kid, they give you like picture guides on how to write letters, right? You first learn how to write the letters of your language, and you usually have like guides to show you what it should look like, and obviously people have handwriting later on that changes it, but you know, you have little picture guides and you follow the lines and you do all that kind of stuff. And then you learn to attach those letters to words, words to meaning, right? You give structure to, or you allow those letters to give structure to meaning. That's where you start learning basic words, basic things to understand, a much more abstract thing than just, hey, do you know how to write this letter? And then it goes from words to sentences to, you know, much more than that. Being able to write in a language to describe things that are abstract and indescribable. That's where you get to when you are an adult or even, you know, younger than that. But at that point, when you hit that, do you need a guide to show you how to write the letters? Right? I think at a certain point you realize that I don't need this specific piece because I'm worried about other things. When you're worried about how do I describe something or how do I, you know, answer this question, like, I'm not worried about how am I drawing my letters anymore. And so that's the kind of same concept of my worries are now so much more than just how do I pose this or how do I draw this. And for the most part, there are times where that's not the case. I'm still very much worried about how do I draw this thing if I'm not used to it. But in the times where that's not my problem, then it's not really that big of a stretch to start drawing without a sketch. I think people think it's a crazy, like, thing that you can do and it requires some, like, godlike mental powers, but it really isn't. I think quite a few artists actually draw this way, especially artists that do, like, anime stuff. I think when you learn a style through learning a style versus learning how to draw in a more traditional way, a lot of artists actually draw from imagination a lot more often than they think they are. You know, the results are fundamentally, like, the same. It's the same process. So whether or not you feel like it's for you is one thing, but getting to it is not necessarily deviating from the traditional processes of learning how to draw. It's just, at what point do you feel like you've stopped finding the sketches useful? And that's when, you know, that's when you can decide if you want to do that. I used guides. I used all those things. I would divide the face up. I would use, like, balls and cylinders and squares and cubes and all that kind of stuff. Like, I went through that. And they're helpful when you don't really have a good idea for, like, what 3D form is and how to describe it. And I think it's very helpful to spend time really learning what it means to use those things, because, you know, I think a lot of people just kind of take for granted the idea of, like, using a circle or a cylinder for the arm and, like, a circle for the joint. They don't think about how that cylinder will mean so much more when it's no longer a cylinder, when it's, in fact, a bunch of smaller tapered cylinders, like muscles, connecting to various different parts of a smaller core cylinder, or, like, the bones, wrapping around it to create mass. Like, it becomes so much more complicated that knowing cylinders and really feeling them as three-dimensional forms in space, just the idea of getting to that point is much more difficult than I think a lot of people consider it to be. And it's also way more important than I think a lot of people find it to be. And you can only really appreciate it once you've gotten to a point of, like, hey, I don't actually think I've seen, or I think of the human body as three-dimensional when I draw. That was a realization I came to when I was a couple years back, I guess. I don't really know when, but I just think I remember feeling like, I don't think... Even though I see humans every day, even though I have a body of my own, I don't really think of things in three-dimensional space. I think of them as two-dimensional lines that I'm drawing, and I know where the lines go, but I'm not thinking about this as it turns in space. I'm not thinking about it as a whole thing, and that's why a lot of people say when you do figure drawing, it's important to do figure drawing in person because you have to actually see that thing in real life, translate 3D space onto a two-dimensional surface. It's a different feeling than when you're drawing with a photo. So it's like, just being able to actually understand what it means to use cylinders and circles and measuring lines and all that kind of stuff is a whole nother thing in itself that I don't think a lot of people really appreciate. And so it isn't until later in their life that they're like, okay, I spent my whole life drawing cylinders and squares and cubes and whatnot. I've never actually cared that they were cylinders or cubes or whatnot. I cared about the lines I was putting down and whether or not it looked like it was in perspective. But did you actually take the time to think about how it turns in space? Did you consider, you know, how it becomes more complex but also fundamentally the same shape when you start adding all these other details like anatomy and like movement and posing and all that kind of stuff? The fundamentals are very important, and I don't think it's honestly all that possible to take everything you should be taking from it when you're learning it. It's usually once you're past it that you're kind of like, that was so important, and I didn't really care at the time. But can't really blame people for not caring. It's not very fun. I think you have to learn to love it after a while, but all this to say, absolutely. I used all of those things, and I didn't appreciate them until almost 10, 15 years into drawing. And then I was like, oh shit, this stuff actually kind of important. That's crazy. Yes, they're all pre-made videos with a pre-made curriculum. Hey, Mink. Pet Peach. Miss Peach, you're getting pet. She just woke up from a nap. Get up and stretch. I'll do so. To give Peach more pets, I must get up and stretch. Miss Peach! Tiffany. How's Miss Peach? She's doing good. She has been sleeping and roaming around. I think it's very indicative of how far she's come that she's been sleeping outside of my room and been preferring to sleep in like the living room and stuff, which is nice. It means that she's comfy. How's her diet? It's hard to say with her. I've been feeding her less, which she has caught on to and is very displeased by. But hard to tell if she's losing weight. 'Cause, like, honestly, outside, like, Peach has always kind of looked thick. She's never, even when she was at her lowest weight, at like 11 pounds, she was never like thin, you know? So for someone like me who sees her every day, it's hard for me to say, like, does she look thinner? Has she lost weight? And she will not suffer to let me fucking, like, measure or weigh her, so it's like, I kind of just have to hope and trust that, like, by feeding her less and by kind of trying to play with her more, she will lose weight again. But, yeah, progress on that is going to be relatively unknown until I take her to the vet again, which probably is not going to happen until, like, after August, which is when a bunch of stuff is happening. Okay, that's actually really funny. I got her the biggest leash I could find for cats. Like when I first got her, and it didn't fit around her stomach or her chest. It like couldn't fit. So I have to get like a small dog leash, I think, to do it. I really want to take her on walks. I don't know how she'll deal with that. But I would love to be able to take her out on walks. That would be so cute. I would die. I remember, I went to the beach once with some friends, and while we were parking, I saw this surfer dude, like, straight surfer dude, completely jacked. He was, like, super tan. He got, like, the curly sea hair, you know, like, where you've been in the ocean for too long and your hair's just, like, real curly and tangled. And he's like taking some stuff out of his trunk and whatnot. And he takes a little backpack out from his back seat, and it's a little bubble backpack with a cat in it. And I'm like, that is character design. This man is jacked. He's tanned. He's oiled. And he brought his cat to the beach with him. And it is so cute. I wish I could, like, just, you know, see how that cat spent its day, but, we were leaving, and that made my day. I really want to be able to take Peach out, because I think she's interested. I think she generally wants to see, like, the outside a little bit, and I mean, she was, like, a street cat, so I think it makes sense for her to want to see what she's been used to, but, not safe where I live to, like, let a cat out, and, just because I live next to a road, so, without a leash, or anything like that, it's just kind of unsafe. But I need to find a leash that fits her, is the main thing. Miss Peach, are you trying to leave? I'll let you out. I will open the door for you, Miss Peach. You've earned it. I'm being a very sweet girl today. Out you go. It is character design. This is like very off topic, but one of my favorite things in the world is reading like trashy romance webtoons. Not really trashy. They're just like, it's just like melodramatic webtoons about romance, because I think it's amazing how some of them are so brilliantly written and then how some of them are so terribly written. I have like a morbid curiosity about the ones that aren't so well written. So I read a lot of those in my free time, and a lot of them are set in some kind of like pseudo historical setting, right? A lot of them are like very European focused, like they border on Rococo, but I don't think they actually want to be in the Rococo era, but they love the kind of pomp and circumstance of like the super elaborate, beautiful places. It's like half Gilded Age, half Rococo, right? Yeah, exactly. One of my favorite things ever that these artists do, a lot of them being in Korea, Korean webtoons specifically, it's just like they will just have these characters show up in like the shortest mini skirt with like bunches of lace, like transparent, like translucent fabric, like the most synthetic dyes, which is like the synthetic dyes part, the crazy colors, not the historically inaccurate part, but just like the just like they have like their legs are showing, they've got you know, just the wildest, most revealing outfits, and I'm like, that is courage. That is absolute disrespect to the history, and I respect that. Because like there is absolutely no like credence given to different eras of historical dress, and I think it is brilliant. Because, you know, why are you showing up in something that I'd see on Shein, but you're like stuck in like the early 1400s, you know? It's crazy. I love it. It's like, it's the best. I love seeing just like the total like creative liberty that they accidentally take with just like, I'm not doing the research about like how these costumes or like, you know, historical fashionable dress was even constructed, worn, any of that kind of stuff. I love seeing like corsets on top of petticoats. I love seeing like interpretations of things that absolutely was not how it was constructed, but God, is it very fun to watch. It's just like, I don't know, there's something fantastic about it, because I think character designs done without research, sometimes it's the best thing. You know, character designs don't have to be that deep. You don't have to research everything about it. It is, yeah, it's been one of my favorite things. Still is, because, you know, when you do concepts for work and you have to like figure out kind of logistics of things a little bit more, seeing someone just like totally just not give a shit is amazing. Difference between Gilded Age and Rococo. So there's different eras of history, specifically within Europe. It mainly has to do with like, well, one, Rococo is based in, I believe, I mean, there's different regions, right? But Rococo is kind of an 18th century thing. It's very much, it was primarily a French thing, I believe. So 18th century, French. I mean, there were other variations of it for sure. And then Gilded Age is like the turn of the century, like late 1800s, early 1900s, like that transition between the 19th century and the 20th century in America specifically. So totally two different eras and two different points of time, right? But you know, it's good to, I feel like personally when you do character design, it's good to kind of have an understanding of how fashion changes throughout time, if not just to know that there's options out there for different silhouettes, because there's a totally different I think approach to fashion nowadays than there was before, in terms of what people dress like in their day-to-day lives. Because in the past, even people that weren't necessarily rich or affluent, there was a level of, like, the approach to dressing was a lot more so creating the structure to dress in the silhouette that you want, right? You know, that's where a lot of people know about corsets, right? But there's a lot of stuff. There's panniers, there's hoops, there's crinolines, like, there's a lot of different ways that you can create the shape of your body, how it looked like when it was wearing clothes. Nowadays, the shape of your body is predetermined. It's what you are. You wear your clothes, so what your body is like will change the way that the clothes look. But in the past, there were different eras of this, but there was definitely a time in which you created the shape that you wanted through the structural, like, understructure of your clothes. Whether or not that's through corsets, through bum pads, through panniers, right? Rococo is super known for its super wide hips and its really tall hair. You didn't have that naturally. You created understructures. They would wear belts with like these hip hoops basically, where the dress would kind of fall off of, and that was you creating that silhouette. Closer to like, think late 1800s, like turn of the century again, there was that kind of like S-curve silhouette. There was the pigeon breast kind of look. All of that was manufactured through how did you wear your clothes, what kind of corset were you wearing, like what were you doing to enhance the shape of what the clothes looked like in the end, versus like, was your body fit for that style? You know, nowadays it's like, oh, is that fashion or are you just skinny? It is like a thing that happens nowadays, versus, you know, it's just like different, like, I guess, intentions and different philosophies towards how people wear clothes and all that kind of stuff. I think it's cool to know about, even if you don't look at newest fashions, even if you don't know the eras. It's just cool to keep an eye out on it, because then you kind of get more of like a I don't know, just an overall view of how humans have changed their perception of beauty, how humans have changed their perception of, like, how they express themselves. Because I think human expression is kind of the core of what character designers are trying to do, right? You're trying to determine how this character expresses themselves within the context of the world and the story and the genre and all that kind of stuff. So knowing how humans have done it in the past, like, you know, I think one of the biggest failures of modern fantasy and modern sci-fi and all that kind of stuff is that they have severely neutered the human love for color. Like, humans love color. If ancient, like, civilizations, if, like, past cultures had access to synthetic dyes, you bet everything would be absolutely vibrant with so many colors, because they already did it. They already tried, right? There was no, like, hesitancy towards, like, oh, everything has to be, you know, like, beautiful and elegant and minimalist. Like, it wasn't like that. They loved color. Color was a great thing for them. And nowadays, like, color is something that is not a part of our vision of the future. And even in fantasy, which is most ostensibly never about the future, for the most part, right? Some of them are, but a lot of fantasy things are not set in the future. They are insistent that, like, very fantastical things are in shades of brown and gray. And it's like, tell me why, you know, in a world of magic where they could just create the technology for synthetic dyes, that people aren't absolutely out of their minds dressing up in these fantastic colors if they don't have to be like this gorilla type character. If you have, like, a royal figure or someone who isn't trying to hide who they are, I think it's kind of fun, more fun to think about, like, you know, hey, they don't have to hide who they are. They absolutely have no problem being public about their identity. So why aren't they wearing, you know, the newest colors, the most expensive dyes? You know, why do we insist on seeing classical art as these, like, pale marble when in reality they were most definitely painted? Because people love color. It's just, like, it's an aspect of human behavior that I think is so undervalued. And especially in fashion and stuff like that, and costume design. Like, nowadays a lot of people just put things in shades of black and gray and brown. Because it's seen as, you know, more logical, more rational? I don't know, man. Like, you got superheroes. You telling me they're not wearing, like, bright ultramarine for just no reason? I think it's cool. I think learning that history is fun because it really opens up your mind to all of the possibilities of what fashion has been and what it could be. And it makes character design more interesting. There's just a lot more there, more substance there when you give, like, pre-existing human history a chance to kind of live again in a more modern sense. Which is, like, granted, a lot of futuristic things nowadays are very dystopian, because that's how we currently see our future, right? I've always found it really interesting that media set in the future is always very indicative of the present that they're living in. So, you know, in a time when people are very nihilistic or very kind of not hopeful about their future, it's always a much bigger indication of the present day that they made that content in. And for us, a lot of it is dystopian. A lot of it is like, we want to see the underdog fight against the pre-establishment, or, you know, you want to see people in dire straits somehow, like, surpassing that, and that's where dystopian futurism comes from. Which is, you know, that's like a form of futurism, right? Which is fine. That's cool. But, you know, I think there's a time and place for when the designs within those like IPs, I guess. The time and the place for when those designs have to be far more muted to really serve the story. And then times where I'm like, I don't think you have to. I don't think it's necessary. And I mean, obviously you have to think about how the average person's gonna react to that, which is like, how are they wearing all these bright colors that's so unrealistic and irrational? And it's like, yeah, but it's more fun to look at. It's more fun to live in this world that's far more colorful than the one that you see every day is, I think, worth exploring when it comes to fictional media. Media that's not meant to bring you back to a time where, you know, there are historical precedents for, like, you know, the lack of color, the lack of kind of like financial stability to allow that kind of outward expression of joy to be something that was common. And I don't know. I think people will never become willing to accept certain types of media until there is a pressure to expose them to certain types of media. So obviously, you know, audiences are not going to be super down for the kind of more outward, very like fringe type content if they're never forced to confront the fact that they don't consume that kind of stuff, and how much more rich their lives could be if they, you know, engaged with things in a different way, apart from the status quo, apart from formulaic stuff. And I think as a character designer, there's like a really cool opportunity there to try and do something with that. I think that's kind of why, you know, a lot of people are drawn to Japanese media, like Japanese like games and art and whatnot. I think it's very indicative that a lot of the, you know, mainstays of gaming globally, a lot of those games come from Japan, because I think there's a creativity, a philosophy about cool, about fun, about kind of the direction that is very different from the West. And there's an outward expression that is much more, I think, it's less tied down to what things should be, what things logically should be, and a lot more of an emphasis on like the kind of absurdity that comes with unrestrained creative kind of like expression. You know, that's where you get the really just dumb, stupid, absolutely insane types of, like, you know, ways to play a game, mechanics. That's where you get character designs that make absolutely no sense, but it's kind of fun, you know. And it's exciting to see because there's no precedence for, like, well, this has to be a logical thing, form fits function, that kind of thing. That's a much bigger attribute of Western creative philosophy than it is of Japanese creative philosophy. And I think it's very indicative of, like, the fact that people generally do kind of like to see things that are new and exciting, and it makes them, like, excited to live a player fantasy that is impossible in reality. You know, obviously people enjoy playing more realistic games for other types of reasons, right? That's why, you know, first-person shooters that are very realistic, very specific type of audience that enjoys that kind of stuff. Then there's a totally different audience that, you know, wants to live other different types of lives, and the cultures within them and the color within them and all that kind of stuff. Vastly different. Vastly more unrealistic, more illogical, but infinitely more enjoyable to them, right? I think is something character designers have to keep in mind. Because it's knowing your audience, it's knowing what is the intent of the product you're trying to make. I messed this up. It's supposed to be on the shoe. And to understand what it means to give someone a player fantasy, and give them the tools to enjoy it, requires or at least I would hope, benefits from someone who enjoys seeing all of the different ways that humans have expressed themselves, all the different ways that across cultures and eras and all that kind of stuff, humans have already invented a lot of ways to be weird and interesting and unique and quirky. And that you don't really have to go too far out, or it's not really all that illogical to think that humans love things like color. They love things like super ostentatious, totally unrealistic, bombastic things. They always have in history, but we as a kind of more modern thing have placed a lot of restraints on what is right or interesting or logical. And it requires the artist, the individual, to want to not conform to, I guess, those ideas, to then ask, what is it that I should think about and care about in order to break away from that. I think costume, fashion history is a great place to start. That was a long rant. Anyways. Celestial, thank you for the gift sub. Thank you so much. What do you think would be the steps to improve in art or drawing? Is there something specific that you'd like to improve? I'm hydrating. I'll hydrate. Thank you. I very much appreciate that. If you can say anything about it, what's your favorite thing you've designed this year? I cannot talk about it, actually. Cannot. What have I, like, publicly posted? I will say, I do really like my, I think my D&D characters have actually been very, very fun to me. I think all of them have been, like, something I've been pretty happy with, even if, like, oh, can I get to play them and whatnot is a different thing. So, like, Kaisa is obviously something I've drawn a lot more often recently, which, I don't know how many of you guys have seen that character. I think most people have. Do I have any more recent, like, saved out things that I don't know. If you've ever seen, like, a, where is it? Where's my D&D folder? Here. Oh, well, there's Titania, who I really love. This character that I made a while ago, which I haven't posted this because I don't think her design is finished yet. I'd like to give her more details. She's fun. Obviously my Furbolg that I've been drawing a lot recently has been good. My Owlin, who is here, I think she's also pretty fun. I think my D&D characters have all been pretty cool. And I think those are the characters I've been designing in my free time, because I don't really have a lot of time nowadays to just, like, sit down and design any characters. So I'd say probably those characters have been pretty good for me. Pretty proud of them. They're pretty neat. I was thinking of going Warlock, but I don't know. We already have a Warlock in the party, and I was wondering if I should pick, like, a different class, because we have like a cleric, we have a Hexblade Warlock, and then we have my Bard, and I'm like, originally I was gonna spec her into a Barbarian, but we already have a character that's, like, pretty much a massive tank and a DPS, which is the Hexblade Warlock, and I'm kind of like, do I want to, like, what was the party missing, I guess, in that way, right? I don't know what we're missing in sort of, like, the dynamic of the party that would make more sense or be more in, like, kind of a intelligent choice. So I need to think about that. Yeah, I feel like my Owlin is very much, like, I would like her to be a much more useful support character, because, like, I don't really have a ton of, like, buffs or debuffs, even though in my heart I am a DPS, I think, through and through. I just always want to do more and more damage, but, like, she in particular I think is much more of a support character. So I need to carefully choose, like, how she's gonna kind of evolve. you, Froggy. I don't know how a good starting point in exploring and finding good resources or books to dive into learning about fashion history, material, fabric, evolution, trends. I think the easiest place to start is honestly YouTube. There's been like a huge boom in fashion historians, costumers, like kind of doing more videos about fashion history. I started out with Bernadette Banner, like when pandemic started, and I've kind of evolved into like documentaries and whatnot, books and all that kind of stuff, and just kind of developed like a more of a casual interest in like really trying to remember different eras, how things change, and what like the social kind of evolution of humans have changed, how fashion has changed. And also getting more into like actual haute couture like videos. I started watching this guy called Haute à la Mode on YouTube. I think that's his YouTube channel. It's a la mode something. He does like reviews on the newest kind of like red carpet fashions and stuff like that, and you know, he I think has a much bigger interest in like genuine haute couture versus just like rich people dresses, and he has like a history behind in terms of like fashion history and stuff, so I like to see what he thinks about, you know, a lot of modern interpretations of like themes and stuff. He does a lot of Met Gala stuff, and because he has like an interest in fashion history, he can pull out references to like, oh, this is this era, this is like very much this era of this designer house's like style or motif and stuff like that. And it's cool to learn, because I think something that's very underutilized by character designers and not costume designers, they've got their shit on lock, mainly character designers, is they don't really pay attention to what fashion as an industry have already done. And the only time they do that is when they have to design like someone who's a little bit avant-garde, but they don't even go that far, right? They only look at fashion when they need something high fashion, but they don't even look at when fashion has done stuff most definitely not for a high fashion audience, when fashion has tried to be subversive or even start a conversation about anything from like the actual state of fashion as an industry, or even just like when they have tried to have like a sociocultural conversation, and a lot of really genuinely unique and interesting interpretations of what fashion can be have come from, you know, fashion designers, obviously. People that spend their lives considering how to use the tools of a realistic, you know, kind of, it's a real medium, right? Art is very much, 2D artists are very much in a kind of illusory kind of space. So we can come up with shapes and designs that are so not very achievable in reality, fashion designers are limited by the fact that they have to make things real. 3D printing has definitely changed it with kind of Eris Van Herpen's stuff, but you know, they still have to very much work in a real medium, tangible medium. And so what they manage to do, I think, is always kind of a work of art. So, you know, diversifying where you get your information from, not just looking at fashion history, but also looking at how modern fashion has kind of evolved, is really cool. I think collecting books on like different eras of fashion, like I have some that are about like Southeast Asian jewelry specifically. I have some that are about textiles. I want to start developing a collection that's not just art books, but I actually want to start getting reference books. There's, you know, a fantastic one that I still really want to get, which is before they pass away, which is a photographer's journey on documenting a bunch of indigenous native tribes that are on the brink of extinction or have been undocumented. And he takes photos of their culture, their practices, their kind of like modalities, and he collects all of them into like a larger book that's fantastic and very well made, and I really want it. I haven't bought mine yet, but I really want one. And you know, it's engaging in documentaries about how clothes have been indicative of changes, social changes, of historical events and stuff like that, which is stuff that you can kind of find in random media, not necessarily in like specifically fashion history stuff. I think, you know, I got my information from a bunch of different places. I think there's also classes you can take. I particularly really want to take a class in fashion history because I want to actually learn and remember all of the eras and stuff like that. I think I personally, I think it helps me understand things better when I really try to push myself to remember things by name and give like a much broader context to things. And history was always something that I wanted to get into, always struggled with, so I might try and do that at some point in my life. But yeah, I think, you know, easiest way to start is by looking at stuff like YouTube. Netflix sometimes has pretty good documentaries as well. And yeah, I think it takes someone else being really into the thing that will help you then find ways to become more interested in the thing. Finding fashion historians on YouTube has been fantastic because it let me see what they loved about their thing, right? It let me see what they thought was really interesting and fascinating and genuinely, you know, fulfilling about their work. And I then started become more interested in like understanding like what about this is fulfilling for you, what about this is like, you know, it always gives back, I guess. What do they get out of it? And from there I kind of just started jumping from source to source, and I'm still learning new things, but wait, let me, Before They Pass Away by Jimmy Nelson. It is this book. Let me grab a photo. So, Before They Pass Away by Jimmy Nelson is from what I've heard, a fantastic book. It's also huge. And just a collection of like just fantastic photos of like all these different places. And like, look, it is an example of what I said before, that humans love color, they love texture, they love like all these different things. And for a designer to not in some way validate or understand that, I think is kind of a missed opportunity, because we as humans have already invented so much nuance and so much kind of like vibrancy in culture and in like the art that we've made and like the performances that we have. At no point is any of this like, you know, it's not necessarily logical, realistic, it's not efficient, right? But it doesn't matter because it's not necessarily about efficiency. Humans like to celebrate things in inefficient ways. And for me, at least, I think that's always been very interesting. It's always been very healing, I guess, for me to see what humans have always been capable of, which is an innate interest in a creative expression. And it kind of leads very well into fashion and all that kind of stuff and costume design. So I had a very guerrilla start to this all this stuff, and I still do. But you know, I think even just starting to develop an interest is already a great thing to do in your free time. I'm gonna move this up more. These legs are not in the right position. Any creative exercises you do? My creative exercise is I look at other people's art. I really like saving people's work because I can then appreciate them outside of the context of like online spaces. Wow, thank you for the host. So I kind of like just sort of offline, away from social media and all that kind of stuff. I'll just look at my books that I've collected over the years. I'll look at art that I've saved that I felt like has really excited me, really given me something that I myself can't give myself when I draw. So, I try to really latch onto like things that spark something in me, and I try to figure out like, why is that? Why am I excited by this person's work? Is it something that's just like, oh, they draw better, right? They have like a much better understanding of fundamentals. Their design chops are like way more appealing and just like a lot more interesting. I feel like I have like a much better idea for how different ideas can kind of merge into one design, like all that kind of stuff. I have a lot of different reasons why I like people's art. I try to figure out why I do that. And I try to think about like what about my work does not hit the same thing, right? it could be that my ideas are stale. I think in ways when we hit kind of an art block, it's because subconsciously our brain and us subconsciously have decided that the work that we do is no longer interesting. Like, we don't actually want to stagnate. There is a desire to, because by just drawing stuff in your comfort zone, there's less of a chance for you to not be good at the thing. But when you don't try to leave your comfort zone, I think fundamentally your brain becomes less and less interested in what you're working on. And that's where kind of you get stuck creatively on, like, what is it that you want to make. So I always kind of try to, in that case, broaden my world a little bit. I try to look at other people's work. I try to use, like, the books that I've collected to kind of learn all the different ways that art can be made, all the different styles that art can be kind of produced in, and really kind of revive in myself this, like, love and interest and, like, excitement for what is this, like, huge spectrum of creativity, of expression. And I always find that once I've kind of spent a little bit of time looking at how other people have had fun, how other people have enjoyed and lived through their work, I start to become more and more excited by the idea of myself getting back into it, of me trying out new things. And it could be as simple as, like, I think I want to try and make a character that's a little unconventional for me. I think I want to try and draw a scene versus just a single character. Or I want to try giving them a prop and really, like, making this a whole design and not just like a face or a portrait, you know. It's wanting to paint in a different style, and or even just trying like a new character idea. Any of those things I think are ways to reignite like a creative interest in what you're doing. But long and short of it is, I think if you're struggling creatively, it could be that you haven't yet done enough to kind of innovate on or iterate on or innovate the stuff that you draw. And in some part of your mind, like, you're tired of what you've always been doing. You're tired of drawing just faces, or you're tired of just drawing, like, nice looking characters that don't really have a ton of other stuff about them. And it'd be good to kind of visit, why do you like certain artists? What about their work excites you? What is it that's not exciting about your own? And then use that as a jumping off point to kind of move yourself forward. Which, by the way, easier said than done, right? It sucks, always, to be in a state where you just kind of don't feel creatively invested or fulfilled or even just, like, empowered. So sometimes when that happens, I just kind of take a step back from art and take a break. Sometimes it's just a matter of I'm too close to this thing. I'm too in my head. I'm too close to it. And that prevents me from being able to really see things in a not so serious way, right? I think there's a possibility, always a possibility, that you're making it out to be a lot more complicated, a lot more dire, there's a lot more weight applied to it, and it's preventing you from really, like, trying stuff. It's preventing you from really in the safety and comfort of your own privacy to, like, really explore things that you're not used to. And when you take a step back from it, sometimes it's easier to see what it really is, and not just, always up close and personal to what you struggle with in your work all the time. So that could also be a way. Yeah, I think that's very normal. I think when you outgrow someone, you outgrow their ideas, and especially if they haven't grown with you, I think it's very normal to not like their work anymore. And I think it should be fine to like unfollow them, follow new people, find new people. And I think it's a really good sign that you've outgrown people that you followed a long time ago. Because I don't think staying with the same people once you've kind of outgrown their style or their tastes or their ideas is necessarily a bad thing. I think it shows that you've grown and you've changed and you're a different person now. And what you like and what you find, you know, exciting and interesting has also shifted. So I think when that happens, you should see it as a chance, you know. See it as a sign that, you know, you have become someone with a different foundation, a different set of interests, and allow yourself to grow past that. I frequently, whenever I return to social media, will find artists where I'm like, I don't know what exactly I saw in your work, but I don't really see it now, and I will unfollow. Happens every time I come back to social media to some extent and like look through stuff. It's like, oh, you know, not as fun. And then sometimes I'll find people where I'm like, you have done so much growing, so much more, like stuff has changed in your work, and it's so much more interesting and it's so much more exciting to see, and it's like, I'm so glad I followed you, I'm so glad I stayed with you. That happens as well sometimes. One leg is fine, the other leg is not okay. think people generally follow way more artists than they feasibly can look at and appreciate. And I find that sometimes it leads to a problem where they, when they follow too many artists, they fall into a kind of a trap of kind of brainwashing themselves in a way. Because it's almost like overstimulation. They kind of see too many different styles, they see too many different ways of interpreting stuff, and they kind of take it personally. Or a lot more, they let it affect them a lot more than they should. And instead of just appreciating that the art is good, they try to take on so many different elements of other artists. They kind of allow it to sort of take over and sort of overwrite their own interests and their own like goals in art, and then superimpose what they think is better based on the artist that they follow. They think that their style is so much better than their original goal, and they should aspire to be this person and that person and all these people, but they got different styles, you know? Like, all these different artists have so many different ways of drawing that they get confused by all of the different ways that art can look, and then what ends up happening is that they just kind of almost shut down because there's too much information, always too much information online. And it's never necessarily the problem of social media. I think it's just people haven't learned yet how to sufficiently place like emotional boundaries towards what is just purely, I like this person's art because their art is good, and which artists are, you know, I'm following you because you have something that I want that I don't have, and your art somehow encapsulates this like more abstract thing that I'm trying to work towards, and by looking at your stuff it makes me feel like I'm getting a better understanding of what I want with my own work. That's a very different reason for following someone, and the edges are pretty soft for some people that, you know, they won't really register that this person that they're following, it's not because their style is something that they want to have, or their goals or aspirations is something that they want to emulate, but because this art... Hey, yes, Miss Peach. You want pets? But because this artist is better, and they draw well, it's like, well, then obviously I should look up to them, and you know, I should be learning from them. But sometimes artists can just be good artists that you like to see and keep tabs on, and they don't have to have a style that you want to, you know, look up to or learn from. And I think following too many artists sort of opens up the possibility for you to fall into that trap. Doesn't necessarily mean that you are in it, or that you will automatically be sucked into it, but I think there are far more people that don't have that boundary than and more people should. More people should be analyzing, you know, like, when I look at this person's art, because art's a very, you know, personal thing. When I look at this person's art, what am I trying to get out of it, right? Because I like just seeing what people are doing nowadays. I think it's always exciting to, at least for me, appreciate the era of artists and the era of the kind of global art population, and really appreciate the time that I'm living in, you know. I'm doing okay. I'd like to finish this and one other one before we end stream today. So, you know, something to think about if you are following a lot of people. And even if you aren't, still, I think it's good to analyze, like, what am I trying to, how do I feel about this person? How do I feel about their work? Is it anything specific, or am I just kind of following them to keep an eye on good art? I think it's nice to have a bunch of artists whose art you just kind of like to see. But then only holding a couple very specific artists in a much higher regard at specific times in your life, right? There are artists where it's like, me looking at them feels like I'm learning more about myself. It's good to have a couple of those at a time, but should be significantly less in number than the number of people you follow. That's it, unless they want me to put the sword in. I can. I mean, again, that's not really the problem, you know. I think following nice art is a very good thing to do. Okay, we will move on. Yes, I will do one more after this one. Oh wait, well we'll go until 10. We'll go into 10. I'm going to assume that the next one's gonna take me up until 10 and probably after, but I'd at least like to get at least 2 done. I thought it was like 9:30 or something. What's my favorite video game character designs? I think the main character from the upcoming game Bomber Cyberpunk is really fun. I really like his main design. I mean, you know, the first cast of Overwatch was always very fun to look at. I don't know. Do I have a favorite character design from a video game? I don't know. I don't know if I, like, have one where I'm like, yes, absolutely. No. like his design. Isn't my favorite. I don't know if he's like all that complicated for it to be like my favorite. But I think his design's good. I developed a more comic book linear approach to drawing, but when it comes to color, my approach is very traditional oil painting. I've been trying to get these two things to work together, but there's always looks too simple or flat or completely underrated. Taking Craig Mullins' course to help me understand and break down what I'm getting wrong. Any thoughts? Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by traditional oil painting. I'm going to assume in the most, like, traditional sense. Craig Mullins? Why Craig Mullins? I mean, I guess he's just, you know, he is an artist, who has, like, a more painterly style, so I guess it makes sense. But, I think if you're trying to go for a more comic book style, you have to think about, like, what are the things you want to keep about what you already do? And what are things that you're willing to change given the difference in format, right? I think when you're doing a comic book style, it's important to, or I guess it's not for a comic book, so then it's a little bit different, but it's important to think about like what best serves the final product, right? Just because you have these other things that you typically do doesn't necessarily mean you have to bring them in. Maybe it's time to learn like a new way of coloring. That doesn't necessarily throw out the fundamentals of what you learned with your traditional style, but it's a new style that fits the lines, that fits the more comic booky thing. And it's not like people haven't painted with the comic book look, right? They have, but you just have to decide for yourself, like, what is it that you want to keep? What is it that you want it to ultimately look like? And, you know, don't feel like you have to stay faithful to what you've already described as your style. I think it's much more interesting to try out a different style, a different coloring thing, a different approach to it, and see if it works better, see if it actually adds and kind of feeds back into your current work. That is a possibility, and by trying to mash them together when it clearly isn't the same, like they don't fit the same, you know, thing, they don't fit together too well, could be a sign that you should try something new. Sorry, I'm trying to read this and talk at the same time. Dry eye with a telescopic lens, left eye dark brown purple for outfit, details of the white dress, imagine them on her black jacket. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was trying to like read because there's a description and I was like reading and talking. Okay. They want to merge the two? What does the jacket look like? Okay, it's just a jacket. No, I think I answered it. I think we're good. honestly, I haven't been watching a lot of things lately. I don't really have the time or the interest, I guess. I guess I've been watching a lot of Dimension 20 shows, but even then it's like I will watch like 30 minutes of it, then switch to music, and then switch back and whatnot. I generally watch like video essays and stuff, versus like media. That's been my go-to since I don't actually have to watch it to get the information, I guess. That's kind of the appeal. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, I'm watching a lot of stuff from FD Signifier, Big Joel, Sean, yeah, I think I've rewatched the video that Sean made on Harry Potter like multiple times over. It's just like a, I don't know, it's cool to see like someone who's infinitely smarter than me analyze a piece of media that I, for the longest time, thought nothing was wrong with it, you know? And then to hear someone else like really dive into like, what does it imply? What does it mean for these specific things to have occurred in the books, for these things to have been established? And I'm like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Like, I think it helps, it really helped me like kind of like rethink sort of what I kind of just accepted as like, oh yeah, that's just Harry Potter. But yeah, he had a really good take on it. It's Sean with a S. It's Shaun. I think is literally just his name. It's like a picture of a skull. I think is his profile picture. And yeah, his video on Harry Potter was fantastic. So I think I've rewatched that like multiple times. It's also long. Like, it's like an hour or something. I'm like, yes, I'm down for the hour-long videos. I've also started to watch this one female YouTuber who, her stuff I think is a little bit like, one, it's geared mainly towards women, because she talks a lot about femininity, being a woman, in like analyzing what it means to have like, or experience kind of the female experience within modern society. So it's a lot more geared towards women, but I think it's cool to learn regardless. Her views can sometimes be a little jarring, I think, just because she's very honest and very blunt about kind of things that she feels very strongly about. But what she analyzes is pretty fun because I think there's been like at least for me personally, if I'm gonna be like more personal, I don't know. Femininity has kind of been something, not feminism, just femininity in general has always been kind of like something I never truly appreciated or understood or even validated or respected, despite growing up as a woman and never having really questioned my femininity in any way as I grew up. Like, I've never had to rethink it. I think it was pretty illuminating to see someone talk about that just sort of like candidly and say that, you know, recent pushes towards like this new idea of feminism sometimes completely invalidates what it actually what is actually trying to support, and what does that mean for younger like girls who are growing up nowadays. Like, you know, what is it teaching them? What is it showing them? What is it making them afraid to do? And be honest about. And where does modern philosophy about it like kind of close the doors for certain people to be genuine about like how they want to approach femininity in their own way. So it's been pretty cool. Her videos are also pretty long. But again, it's a very specific subject matter. So yeah, I tend to gravitate towards the video essays that are like hours long. I think her name is, let me see. It's something Observer. The Authentic Observer. Yeah, she's kind of an up and coming creator. Some of her videos have been pretty circulated. Again, it's like I don't agree with her all the time. But I think she represents a very unique, not unique. She's someone who, at least in her public persona, presents herself as someone who really has a strong stance on what she believes in terms of like where collectively all of us have sort of failed in tackling like the deeper nuances of growing up as a woman, feminism, and femininity in general. How we've kind of approached it, how even if you are a woman, how we don't really, even if we live this experience, we don't necessarily approach it and understand it in the same way. So it's cool to listen to someone talk about that in a very specific way, because her channel is almost predominantly kind of focused in different ways that this manifests. It's been a much more popular topic on her channel recently, and I think it's cool, because I personally don't think I've ever really thought about it and sat down and really like considered ways that I also invalidate like, or ways that I have lacked respect for femininity, women in general. I always considered myself someone who like generally didn't, I don't know, I'm obviously very leftist, but also it's like I thought I wasn't necessarily contributing in any way to like, I don't know, methods in which like women are growing up in ways that like are putting them kind of in a box there's like a new set dressing for what is essentially the same way that girls have always grown up. But we were dressing it up as something different, right? And kind of just thinking about, like, where do I stand on this? How do I contribute, like, kind of frame my life in this way? And what are ways that, like, moving forward in the future, I can really genuinely think about, you know, if I ever meet younger artists, women in particular, going into the industry, like, how do you best support them in a way that doesn't, you know, force them into a box of being like, you have to be this way to fit in. It's about learning how to talk to yourself, how to talk to other women in the space, how to hopefully in the future, like if I ever have kids or anything like that, like how do I raise them and talk to people in a way that allows them to more honestly, more genuinely interface with what it means to be a woman today, and what it might mean tomorrow. I think it's just cool to think about, because, you know, in my day-to-day I don't really have to think too much about it. And so a lot of nuances slip under the rug, right? I don't have to think about the ways in which, like, I have either misunderstood or emotionally misidentified attributes or aspects of my life or things that have happened to me, that I've either, like, put in a box or, like, kind of shoved away. It's just kind of nice to see someone talk about that specifically. Hey, Albedo. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, I mean, in Photoshop, there's not really a dedicated adding reference images. I know that Clip Studio has something very similar to that. In Photoshop, you either just, like, make a new canvas and, like, copy paste a bunch of stuff and then just drag the window over to the side. Or you can just, like, paste the references on a different layer in a different folder on the drawing itself and then just use it that way. I don't think Photoshop has any other more like specific ways of allowing you to use reference next to it. There are other programs which let you do that. Quadro is one, Quadro. It's a program which lets you copy paste reference images and then you can have them floating above the Photoshop file or the program itself. So like if you use Photoshop or Clip, it'll just float on top of it even if you have Photoshop active and not Quadro. So it's really helpful if you just kind of want your reference to be floating independently from your program. I found that it was kind of hard to use it because I would always it would always get in the way of what I was working on. I personally use PureRef, which is another reference collecting program, but PureRef is kind of its own file, its own folder. Or its own like program, but it's nice. I like being able to write notes in it. I like being able to collect stuff into different areas in a kind of reference file. So that's my preference. But yeah, Photoshop doesn't have anything like that, which, you know, honestly, like I personally don't think it needs to. Photoshop has always been a program for many different people for many different reasons. Do I think Adobe should take some pointers from Clip? Absolutely. But I also think there are plenty of smaller businesses, smaller companies that have come up with solutions to it that I would rather I pay them than Adobe trying some ham-fisted way to put them out of business. So I'm happy to like buy, you know, licenses to their programs or donate to them because they've come up with some pretty awesome like alternatives to what I think Photoshop has itself. it's always fun when there's like a mixture of utility, right? Like a lot of these kind of I don't know the actual word for them, but that kind of almost like military closure, right, in the front. Having it show up in different ways and different other styles of clothing, I think is always very fun to see. Plus, I think uniforms have always been very fun and cool. Yeah, I mean, it's like the closure though is based on military like ceremonial wear. The designer uses the same thing in their wedding dresses. Because the shape of it even, right, is very indicative of the like lapels of a lot of those of like classical gentlemen's wear. The kind of like overcoat is very much based on like a much more, it's a pretty dated version of the gentleman's like coat closure. The military stuff is, regardless of like the use of it now, is steeped in military culture, or at least like the history of it. But you know, the cool thing is that you can take all those things and then just like remove the context, put them in something else, and it looks cool. But the fact of the matter is it is still like, even if it is a wedding dress in this context, it is still referencing the military uniforms. Yeah, his lukewarm defense of 50 Shades of Grey was a pretty cool one. just because I never saw the movies themselves. So it was cool to see that, you know, there was an attempt made in the first one to actually try and rectify some of the failings of the original source. It reminds me of the difference between, like, the book Devil Wears Prada and the movie Devil Wears Prada. The movie Devil Wears Prada was rewritten and recontextualized so that it doesn't have, like, the same kind of approaches to the core theme that the book had, because the book was kind of just like a revenge fantasy, but the movie is a lot more of, like, you're watching this character's growth into someone that she doesn't want to be, and then her making the decision to divorce herself from, like, the thing that was turning her into this new person, even though she realized how good she was at the job, right? It was like her recognizing, like, no, if I can have a choice in this, I don't want to be a part of it. And that was, like, kind of something the movie put into what the book did not have. Do you do sketches or anything else to plan out these illustrations before illustrating them? I kind of know you do a lot of work in collecting references and such, but do you ever do mocks the illustrating beforehand? Yes, absolutely, I do. Illustrations are different than just, like, drawing a character. I always plan out my illustrations because there's a lot more moving pieces. And I do the whole thing. I do, like, the thumbnails, I do, like, the value breakups, I do, you know, the quick sketches and all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, absolutely. Illustrations are a totally different beast. I don't tend to, like, riff and improv them as I do with my character sketches, because characters, it's a lot easier to keep track of everything that's going on. Illustrations? Absolutely not. Not for me, at least. Any cool personal work that you do that you can show us a bit? All my personal work nowadays are just, like, sketches. Which is not too dissimilar from what I do, like, this kind of stuff. No worries. But yeah, I haven't really had a lot of time to do a lot of personal stuff. Maybe once we're done with all the commissions, which we are, in my humble opinion, not too far from. We've got, what, 37 left? Which is, like, such a big change from, like, the 100 that I had in the beginning. So I think we're getting close. Getting sort of close. Once we're done with charity commissions, I'll get back to, like, I'll get back to, like, drawing more personal stuff. Because that's usually when I do my personal work, at least before, was, like, during streams. Because, like, my weekends were busy, and then work week is obviously busy, so that'll be fun. I think that will be very enjoyable. Do they not normally let you do that? Interesting. need to study shoes more. It's been like something I've been trying to focus on lately. Is really trying to pay attention to the lines that I put down when I draw shoes, but it is hard. I think if someone like is able to draw shoes or feet or something like that really well, one, says something about them. Two, not always. Well, if you're able to draw shoes really well, like that takes such like a, it's like such an intersection of like perspective, 3D form, like form language, like all those kinds of things. I always struggled with them like hardcore. So there was a point where I was like, I need to learn how to draw shoes like in a way that's much more authentic and not just like ham-fisted. And somehow I got into shoe culture because of it, but then, you know, now I'm at a point where it's like, I can sometimes get like a pretty nice drawing, and then sometimes it's just like, perhaps I learned nothing. Left. Oh, right eye with a telescopic lens, left eye's a... Let's go. I'm going to assume it's over her eye. Just curious, how do you break down the basic human body? Do you also use boxes and cylinders since it's easier to calculate in simpler form? Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of different ways to kind of break down, like, the complexities of humans. Starting with cubes and cylinders are great because it forces you to interact with the fact that these are 3D forms. So yeah, I'd say that that's a good place to start. I mean, don't forego your gestures and your kind of like loose sketches that don't have anything to do with 3D form, but if you're trying to break down human anatomy, cubes and cylinders are great, right? And anything in between, like wedges, spheres. that's kind of how it works in my brain, at least. Like, at this point, since I don't really put those down anymore in terms of sketches, it's how I break them down in my head. And then when it comes to muscles, I try to think about it like braided rope or cord, right? Functionally, muscles are all just cylinders with thinner ends, right? It's like muscles pretty much always functionally look somewhat similar because there's like, this is the actual muscle that you see, and then this is like, you know, the tendinous connections that attach it to bone. And that's kind of what all muscles are like. They just, you know, interweave with each other in different ways. But functionally, this is, you know, you could think about it like a cylinder with like tapered ends. Or you can think about it like, you know, like an elongated sphere and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of different ways to break down that complexity. I think cubes and cylinders has always been my go-to. I think it's always worked for me. Okay, so, I think I might end it here for tonight since I've got some things that I need to finish on my end. Let's see, what next week is next Friday. I may or may not stream next Friday. I might take it easy. Who knows? The next couple of weeks are gonna be pretty busy for me. But yeah, I'll let you all know if I'm streaming next Friday. How do you prevent yourself from adding too much detail or over rendering? I think the biggest way, the easiest way to do that is just to zoom out a lot. You know, like once you feel like you've spent a little bit of time kind of just focusing on one area, zoom out and see if you're just adding way too much in one area or you're spending too much time. I think forcing yourself to kind of see the whole piece sometimes will help you kind of gauge like, okay, I can sort of start getting a gut feeling for when I'm spending way too much time detailing out something versus, you know, more time spent detailing out more stuff all over the piece. So zooming out, I think, is one thing. It helps sometimes to have a separate window for the piece. So if you don't know how to do this, if you go to view, window. If you go to window and then you go to arrange in Photoshop, at the bottom of that, you can create a new window for the piece. If you save one, it'll save the other. It's just another view of the same canvas. And you can set that on the side and then just zoom in and work, and it'll update, you know. And I think this is pretty nice if you don't use the navigator very much. Like, it's nice to have like a separate view for it. So that can help. But I think honestly it's just kind of like learning what becomes too much and what's enough. And you'll get a better sense for that the more you kind of pay attention to over rendering and over detailing. But yeah, that's it for me. I hope you will have a lovely week, a lovely weekend coming up. Thank you as always for coming and stopping by. And thank you for putting up with the fact that I get tired really frequently nowadays, so I end stream slightly earlier. Thank you very much again. And yeah, I will let you all know if I stream next Friday. I may or may not, depends. It is my birthday week, so if I want to just like chill that Friday, I might. So who knows? But I'll let you all know. But thank you for coming. Thank you for hanging out with me. I love you all so very much. And I'll see you all next time.